This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Kindness. We see it all around us. We see it when someone pays for someone else's coffee or holds the door open for another person. We see it in the smallest of gestures, like a smile or a kind word. But it's different when we turn on the news or social media. Oftentimes, what we hear about, what outlets are pushing, is the opposite of kind. Welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. Our goal is to give you a place to relax, to revel in stories of people who have received or given kindness, a place to inspire and motivate each and every one of us to practice kindness every day. Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. Make sure to check out the Deluxe Edition Network's podcast of the month. There you'll find, for the month of April, the Drink O'Clock pod, the Quad Pro Quo podcast, and the Steve and Crypto show. And also, I want to remind you to check in the show notes for my partnerships with the Coffee Bros and Sunday Scaries. I have a special code that you can use to get some percentages off of your orders there. Now, let's get into the show. Hey, welcome everybody. This is going to be such an awesome show. And part of the reason is because my guest today reminded me that April is National Second Chance Month. In 2017, a nonprofit by the name of Prison Fellowship asked Senators Amy Klobuchar and Robert Portman to take the lead with the United States Senate resolution to declare April 2017 as Second Chance Month, and it has been so ever since. And when I put out a call for nonprofits, I was lucky enough to stumble across Kimberly Mansfield, and we kind of bonded over a quote from Ted Lasso. And that quote was, "I hope that either all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather by the strength we show when and if we are ever given a second chance." And if you are a fan of the show, you know that line. And my guest today really, really works to get people that second chance. My guest is Kimberly Mansfield, who is the director and co-founder of the nonprofit Demuniz Legal Clinic. And welcome to the show, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mike. It's good to be here. And you said the name perfectly.
Did I? Mansfield or Demuniz?
No, the Demuniz. There, you said it twice.
Okay, let's not tempt fate anymore. Okay, we'll go with what we've got. So you there's a great story here about how you came. Clearly, your name is not Demuniz, it's Mansfield. Tell me the story about how you came to found this organization, and then we can talk about more about what it does.
Sure. Well, the name Demuniz, the namesake of the organization is the now retired Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, Paul Demuniz. And then Chief Justice Paul Demuniz was on the campus for a panel at Portland State University, where I happened to be finishing up my undergrad. I was a returning student. I'm a first-generation college student. I was very late to the academic party, but I had my eyes on going to law school once I graduated, and it was about the year before, I think. And he came to the panel, and the only thing I remember about the panel is he was the moderator, and they introduced him and said that he was a Portland State alum, and he was a Willamette College of Law alum as well. And those two things, while I was going to be a Portland State alum and Willamette, because it's here in Oregon, was also on my radar. It was way down on the list. I thought I was going to the East Coast. And afterwards, I didn't bother talking to the panelist. I talked to the moderator, the oh-so-gracious Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court. And we kind of hit it off. we just really connected on a lot of things. He was a defense attorney when he started out, a public defender, and was very much in kind of the justice right side of things. And I've always been a champion of the underdog. And I always, the runt of all the litters of kittens was always my favorite. And I was
Yeah.
really connected with, I think it's beings who need a voice, and that I too had needed a voice through life. I was raised to be shiny and silent. So this whole going into law and being a litigator thing was, maybe my defiance of that, or maybe let's just say my growth and my evolution, or both. But we hit it off, and he proceeded to say, "Hey, I'm going to hop on recruitment over there." And suddenly the next thing I knew, things rolled along, and I made a bunch of meetings, and there was an early admit. And then I had the ridiculous good fortune of clerking for him at the Supreme Court through law school.
Wow.
So in January 1st, 2013, we came off the bench. That was when his term was over and he was retiring from the bench. And he had founded 2 years before a public-private partnership known as the Reentry Resource Center. That's a wraparound services for individuals who are re-entering from incarceration or who have a history of convictions. Okay. And that's housing, medical, shoes, clothes, employment, that sort of thing, wraparound services. So he said, "Hey, okay, I think it would be a great idea. You should start a legal clinic at the Resource Center." And I didn't have a diploma or a law license yet.
So you hadn't even passed the bar yet.
My answer was okay. And that's kind of how it happened. So yeah. We drove the bus while we were building it. And the legal clinic provides a little piece of the pie now to the resources that the wraparound services at the Reentry Resource Center provides. So we are a standalone 501c3, so nonprofit now, but we provide that piece to them and are very integrated with them. And that was 11 years ago, January. So
wow, time flies.
So we've been around.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Wow. That's amazing because, and as you say, this is a wraparound service. So everything from finding people jobs but you guys take care of the legal end of it. Anything legally.
Civil legal services. Right. So we help with civil legal side. We're not direct offense attorneys. We are not working on with their offenses or any of that. We're on the release side. And just so everyone knows, probably the biggest thing to point out here is people are like, well, why? What's the purpose? And the purpose is that we know there's been a lot of research done on this, that if you can remove some of the barriers to reentry and some of the roadblocks, because right now it really socially, I won't even talk about the system, but socially people are set up to fail when they walk out. I'll talk about reasons for that in a minute. But if we can reduce some of those so they can reintegrate with communities, it reduces recidivism. So recidivism is the risk of reoffending. Right. And so we want to reduce that, because if you can reduce that, think about it. They can stay out in the communities with their families. They can be gainfully employed and pay taxes. It reduces the cost to communities. It reduces prosecution and defense costs. It reduces imprisonment costs. It improves public safety. So there's lots and lots and lots of reasons to do this. And one also being, as far as I'm concerned, the human component. And that wraps around to where you started, which is, I wouldn't want to be judged on my worst moment, because I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And I don't mind saying that.
Right.
So anybody want to throw stones on that, knock yourself out. But I haven't met anybody yet,
right,
who doesn't, when they think about it, say the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what goes into that, is because everybody's initial reaction is, well, they're a criminal. And whatever happens to them, they deserve it, or whatever. And you went and looked at that and went, again, to be judged on your worst moment for the rest of your life. And I don't know what the stats are for your area as far how young are these young people coming back out or coming back into society?
Well,
Is it somewhere in between? Is it a nice mix? I don't know.
what's an interesting thing is I thought, well, I'm going to make a little list of points I think are most not known about this whole scene. And I thought I'll just, make a few punchy points. Well, I think I ended up at 14. Because
the
I
floor
think
is yours, Kimberly.
Overwhelmingly, people don't understand kind of why things get where they get. And don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to the system in general. I'm not opposed to individuals having to serve sentences depending on crimes. I get the laws and how they're, unfortunately, they're applied. There's disparate impacts on the application, and I'm not going to go into that today because we would be here for 2 weeks.
That's a whole other show.
And then some. Oh, yeah. But there's so many things that people don't understand. So my 14-point list, I'll try and rifle through it. Over 97% of individuals are coming back out. So I think that a lot of times people think, well, they go in, they're off the streets, don't have to worry about that person anymore.
Right.
But they're coming back.
At some point.
Most of them are going to come back into, and to give you some numbers for Oregon, I'm in Oregon. So numbers for Oregon, for instance, and I don't have any new numbers since I think the numbers I'm remembering are like 2016, maybe 17 or 18. So about 700 inmates per month released in Oregon.
Oh, wow.
In my county, Marion County alone, that's about 700 inmates a year to Marion County alone. Just my community. And for instance, more than half, these may be national numbers. Sometimes these get mixed, but more than half don't have a place to live. That is an Oregon number. Most don't have a job. Most mainly need treatment for drug-related offenses or mental health medications and that sort of thing. And it's nationally, I guess, that about 60% don't have an ID or a driver's license when they come out. They have no home to go to. They probably aren't employed when they're coming out. Most people also on my list, the majority were working before they went in. Sure. 1 in 12 kiddos, minors in the United States have had an incarcerated parent. Yeah. That's one that people don't look beyond. There's no treatment inside. So compliance when they get out probably involves them coughing up the money for their own treatment. So, and that's, whether we're talking drug and alcohol treatment, there's some low level courses, so to speak, but there's not credentialed treatment. So, we think, they went in and they got rehabilitated. It's like, well, not exactly, which is not to say that there isn't rehabilitation going on, but it's less specific and directed, as you would think, that there's no did your time or paid your debt, because when you come out, I mean, you kind of did by definition, so we say, but the social sanctions, there's the stigma of a criminal record leads to housing, employment, social discrimination. Lengthy sentences often lead to a loss of custody or contact and parenting time with kiddos. Yeah. And fines and fees and debt often destroy credit history and end up in collections. And consequences could be professional licenses or even driver's licenses can be suspended or revoked. Those are I already named the disparity. That many of these individuals, maybe I should save this for last, but in my experience, and now at this point it's thousands and thousands of people in, but many of them end up going back to work in the system to benefit individuals who have the same challenges or came from the same backgrounds. A lot of people don't understand the difference that arrests are not convictions. Right. And you can say where there's smoke, there's fire all day long, but that doesn't get you anywhere most of the time. And so we now, we can hop on the internet, you or I, right? We could pay $2.99, $5.99, $19.99 and go pull anyone's arrest history online. It wouldn't be an official record.
Oh,
But also, even on the official record, people don't know how to read the record and don't understand that most arrests, the vast majority of arrests, don't end up in even charges. And then even a smaller percentage of those end up in convictions. So
sure.
big difference. I'm not blaming people for not knowing. I'm just saying there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. That were a couple last. There's no true expungement. So people think, oh, you can get your record expunged, sealed, set aside, if you will. And there isn't a true expungement anymore because of the internet. So because we can go search these, you might get it off the state background check, but if you're applying for a apartment, let's say, or a job in the private sector, they may be not pulling state background checks. They may be pulling private background checks. Like I just said, you or I could go online, right?
Oh.
And so they are unregulated, and it just depends on when they trolled for information, whether they would see, let's say you got something sealed. It still may show out there. So again, no true expungement. And that here's I kept two of my biggies for last, is the most serious offenders are the least likely to reoffend. So, which is the exact opposite of what most people, I think, would think. It's the exact opposite of what I would think.
Me included. Yeah.
Yeah. And, a lot of people are like, yeah, but the sex crimes. And it's like, okay, but we can't just put all sex crimes in a bucket, because here's one for you, and it may vary by state. Well, I'm sure it varies by state, but in Oregon, urinating in public is a sex crime.
Oh, it's like exposure.
So, that's the theory. So you get people who I got to tell you, people who look like, I'll say me, but I'll say you and me, who were outdoor concert goers in our youth.
Hey, now.
There's a good chance all of us, at least me and all my friends, would fall in that bucket.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
But we wouldn't be the ones. We are less likely to be the ones who would have got 1, stopped or picked up for it, 2, charged, and 3, convicted.
Yeah.
So think about homeless people. That would be unhomed people, or, could automatically all be.
We'll be right back with more of my conversation with Kimberly Mansfield after this commercial message from another Deluxe Edition Network podcast.
Hey, this is Casey Shearer.
And this is Ray.
Do you like pop culture?
We're pretty sure you do.
Then come on over and check us out at deluxeedition.show.
You will not be sorry. Or maybe you will be. I don't know.
Sex offenders. So I think it's very, very, very important that individuals look beneath that label, because that is one where they're not all alike, and they are serious, and I'm serious about them.
Sure.
So I am not giving anybody a pass. However, I think that lends a little bit of perspective, or maybe just a crack in the veneer in our minds about how we think about one bucket, and it's more than that.
Sure, because you just see the phrase sex offender and you stop right there.
Serious, which is a serious deal. I am not for a second arguing that at all.
But you don't look behind it.
But
why was he labeled as sex? Oh, because he was peeing outside. Well, sign me up. I'm guilty of that too, right? Well, not anymore.
Right. Right. But, we all did, again, the moments that we'd rather not be judged on.
Exactly.
Right?
Thank you.
I think also that most of the reentry clients, at least in Oregon, and I suspect that you would get a national truth to this, are part of our low income and elderly, 850,000 low income and elderly in Oregon. And most of our reentry clients are going to fall into that as well. And we have that number because our legal aid services in Oregon know those numbers, because that's their population that they serve.
Sure.
And the reason that that's important is 85% of those needs go unmet.
Wow.
In Oregon, we have around one legal aid attorney for it used to be over 9,000 in need. I don't know what the new number would be on that. They keep track of it. So you have these individuals who there's just not assistance out there.
Wow.
It doesn't. So we do lots of family law. So, when individuals are reentering and they're trying to set up parenting time, and don't freak out, parents. This isn't that we just like throw everybody back in the mix, but there's safety plans that can be put into place. There's graduated plans. We call them step-up plans. There's supervised plans for starters. But we do know that in the best interest of the child, and there's longitudinal research on this, right?
Right.
That some contact, kiddos knowing, and there are extreme instances where I agree that we would carve out of this, but
Sure.
some contact is better than no contact, because kiddos' brains aren't developed enough and evolved enough to understand that what they see as half of themselves subconsciously, they're not articulating this, but is absent, missing the lack of roots. And that individuals who, overwhelmingly, it's not the majority that reoffend. So they are coming back and they are reinstalling themselves in the community and with their families and their children. So, helping transition that, or some people, when they went in, they had a family member who took a guardianship, for instance, and we need to dissolve the guardianship so kiddos can go back to the individual. We do lots of that stuff. We also do, sometimes there's landlord-tenant issues, or we've helped people not lose their teaching license, at least get kind of a stay on that for a few years to get themselves to kind of, prove themselves.
Sure.
Which is meaningful. But if you got here, at least at that time, if you got a revocation, it was a lifetime revocation. So if we could avoid the revocation and keep a suspension and give somebody, and then they can, balls in their court, they can kind of fly or die on that. And
no, sure, because that's going to impact their ability to get out and find a job and go to that job if their license is revoked. Yeah, sure.
Yep. Or evictions are a biggie, because individuals, when they get out, by and large, want to kind of just keep their head down. And so there are landlords, not all by any means, but there are landlords who will have rentals that are, let's say subpar, from, on habitability issues and stuff. And they know they have an individual who's just going to keep their head down and not say anything. And so I've also come across lots and lots and lots of living conditions that for anyone else are just straight up, you just don't get to do that.
Right.
But these individuals are going to they have a place, they have a roof over their head. They know that's hard to get. So they're not going to make waves, and they don't understand their rights necessarily either. And then we do lots and lots and lots of the expungement, like I said, expungement work, where we do the analysis on whether individuals are eligible with their set of criteria, with their offenses and the time that's passed, whether, the math adds up, and they could seek with the court to have records sealed. Some states call it expungement. Some states call it sealing. Our expungement is the kind of colloquial, coast to coast way to talk about it. In Oregon, the formal name would be set aside. So whether or not they have set aside that. So lots and lots of those, and that opens doors.
Yeah. I think you had mentioned people who go away that had families. And I think most people, they look at that and they go, okay, well, Jane Doe or John Doe went away for XYZ, and we just kind of see it as that, not realizing the ripple effect that might have had on any family they had, because it goes well beyond that. I mean, you've probably lost somebody who provided an income for your household, all of the things that go into that. And yeah, it's just,
right. And then, if we want to talk about the economics in even a political sense, then you have individuals who state monies are coming into support.
Yeah.
Right? And that a lot of times there's such a thread. I did a little bit of work with OYA, that's Oregon Youth Authority, with some individuals in there where we did some clemency petitions for them. So for individuals who had been convicted as minors.
Sure.
And even we did lots and lots of interviews, and on a rare occasion, because it's incredibly labor intensive, we would find an individual that we would hop on board and help them with a clemency. But we did lots of interviews, and the thread throughout was, and I'll refer to the guys because it really was, we were in OIA. The location we went to was for guys. There are fewer females. It's not that there's no females who would fall under the same life history, but it's very much that they had to be providers often at very young ages. So there's not a lot of jobs available for a 12-year-old whose provider either goes away or ends up dead. And they're providing and they're getting picked up for really, mature crimes at really young ages. I mean, these are, think about, 12-year-olds. None of us had developed brains at 12 years old. There's no such thing as a 12-year-old on the planet who has a developed brain. We could even put prodigies in there. They still don't have developed brains.
Right.
So that whole, and the options, when everyone looks to you and says, you're the man of the house now, for instance, and no, they don't take the right avenues, and no, there aren't individuals necessarily stealing the right directions. And maybe they do have bad examples and role models because they haven't been exposed outside of a very small radius, and that they do have, where gangs are often, become their shelter, become their family. And they protect each other because they have nothing, else or nowhere to go. We just really saw, there's so much, if you looked into the background of these individuals, they really can. There's a predictability level now because there's lots of research being done to it. If you look at ACEs, adverse childhood experiences is one scale that's really used. And on that scale, there's all kinds of different traumas and situations of life. And you look at the ACEs scale and they can say, over 3, then you're almost guaranteed, the risk of trauma are really, really high. And then when you get up high, where some of these kids would be 6 or 8, I mean, they can almost, the criminogenic risk is off the charts. And
Kudos
so if you looked at the background of individuals, and if you could empathize enough to put yourself in the shoes for a moment and go, what would I do? If all that was my surroundings, what would I really do?
Yeah.
Maybe some people go, you know what? I'd be the rare rock star, individual who becomes a professional athlete and who is a celebrity and we see them on TV.
Yeah.
That's this many. That's less than this many.
Yeah. That's like the tip.
And they get publicized. So then everyone can use them as an example and go, well, they did it. So if they did it, why aren't you? And it's like, wow, they are outliers. And I'm not taking any cred from anybody who does that.
Oh,
but it's a bigger picture than that. And that, I think, another biggie that should have been on my list, I don't think that individuals understand that when people go into, say, youth corrections, that they don't necessarily come out of youth corrections. For instance, if we did a clemency for an individual, one of our rare, who, if they have a sentence that extends beyond youth corrections, they turn them over to DOC, to Department of Corrections.
Oh, so they go in at like
16
for a 5-year sentence. 3 years of that is going to be an adult 18, correction.
So they're leaving, you're pulling them out of this very therapeutic environment, because that's really what juvenile corrections is, by and large. That's what their aim is,
Right.
How what level that's executed, remains. But OYA, for instance, does a pretty amazing job. I'm really impressed. And they go in and they can be, the kid we took up and did a clemency petition for to the governor. He did everything and beyond what he was required to. He was an absolute star. He got, they can get degrees or partial degrees in there. They can get certificates for all sorts of, skills and engineering skills. They can bring peer mentors in their units and things like that. Like, this kid had done everything, and he was going to get flipped to, pull him out of that environment and flip him to DOC for, I don't remember what his months were. It was right about 2 years.
Oh boy.
And when they hit that point, they get terrified, because the fact is they are walking into where they're going to have to go back to a life like before. They're going to have to find protection. They're going to have to find their safe places. And there are some. And luckily for our kid, it was a very painstaking procedure. It's very thorough. It's very kiddo has to take ownership for things thoroughly. They have to walk back through their crime. They have to talk about what they've done since, what they've gained, what they've learned, what time they've put into things. They have to re-own the whole thing. So the petition for clemency to the governor was 100 and I don't know, 27 pages, something like that. They're a production, and we bind them and do this. And our kiddo was granted.
Nice.
One of the best days of my life. And he had turned over when the word came through. He had turned over to DOC. He'd been in I want to say a week, and we'd visited him in DOC, and he was he was already so fearful in that time, in a week, of the individual who we'd met and interviewed and taken on, a year before, to lodge this petition. I think there's things like that I think people think they go into juvie and they walk out this fixed adult at 18.
Yeah.
Doesn't really work like that.
No, it doesn't. There's no light switch there. You turn 18 and suddenly you're a grown man or what have you. Wow.
And even then, let's talk about that. I mean, at a juvenile, now we're adults then, right? But our brains, we now know that we really don't have evolved adult brains until 26, 27. So, I know. I agree. But fully developed brains are it's just past that mid-20s point. So, not equipped. They're ill-equipped. We're all ill-equipped,
Amen.
We're just under different circumstances.
So now your clinic, though, I mean, you couldn't do what you do without volunteers, right?
At the moment, I am.
Oh,
at the moment, at this very moment, I'm kind of a one person show, but
you do use volunteers.
We do, and sometimes they're law students. I've definitely done. Sometimes we do credited externships where they can apply to do an externship with me and get credits during law school. So sometimes it is those individuals. Nice. Up until about 6 months into COVID. I gave up the physical office. I had a full staff. I mean, I had a staff then and a full-time staff attorney and stuff, and had to get them placed elsewhere, because we were, like everything else, it was changing. So that was tough. So yes, now it is me. And then sometimes volunteers. It definitely forced me to streamline things so that I could do more. I just added up. In fact, my numbers, I think we had the most in-client touches this past year, which was just me, and I helped 215 people.
Wow.
And I guess I should clarify, the legal clinic is a small part of what I do. I'm in private practice as a family law attorney outside the legal clinic. So my legal clinic hours I have 5 clinic hours a week. I do 30-minute appointments back to back during those times. And then I have the work for each of those clients, whatever I'm helping them with in between.
Paperwork,
and that's just aside from, so it's not I'm not devoting the full time to it. So, so the 215 was a pretty happy number for me. And again, it would be thousands at this point over years.
So what drove you to do this type of work?
Private donations, I should add on to the volunteer part. Private donors are where our funding comes from. So that's all, not the state, not county. We are an independent 501c3.
And there's a donation link on your website, right?
There is a donation link on my website. Thank you. That's where
You're very, very welcome. That website will be available in the show notes, folks. And if you love what Kimberly's doing and want to help her out, please feel free to be generous. Or, whatever you can afford. How about that?
Yeah, it all adds up. I mean, we run on a shoestring budget, so really little bits. I really do go a long, long way. That is a very gratifying part about it. Yeah.
I really love what you're doing, and I love the fact that it's, giving people who some people may think don't deserve a second chance, because we all do. And we all, I can't even count the number of second chances I've had in my life. And,
no way.
And so this is what you guys do is fantastic. I love it. It's the definition of kind. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today, Kimberly. I really do appreciate I do appreciate it. And just helping us understand how needed something like this is, your legal clinic and just the work that you do. And yeah.
Can I put one last plug in there that I think is
absolutely
maybe as people, if they listen to this and are considering it, and even whether it applies to themselves or they might think of individuals that they know or in the community or whatever, who were always looking to develop, the resource center is, I'm not personally, but really in this area, to develop what we call rapport with friendly employers who are willing to take on individual, the capacities. I'm not saying throw open the gates, but there's often capacities which individuals can get into. And in my experience, they are often so grateful for the opportunity that it often comes back. We hear back around that they're the best employees they've ever had because they know it's really important to them to make it happen, to stay out, to keep. So I hope that maybe just opening that up a bit. I'd also suggest too that there are podcasts now that have fantastic, if anybody wants to hear more information about them, not my podcast, but podcasts out there with some really amazing voices. If you go on to any podcast source and put Reentry in, one of my favorites is Reentry Connect. There's also Reentry Reframed, Reentry Journey, Reentry Network, but the gentleman whose name is escaping me on Reentry Connect, it's a lot of that stuff you wouldn't think of, and it's geared both for individuals, like us, who aren't justice involved individuals who want to understand, but also for individuals who are justice involved individuals to find some suggestions and tips and support from those who've gone before and know they're not the only person wandering around, because it's that sort of isolation and loneliness certainly doesn't help. Well, any of us, quite frankly.
No, anybody. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I will put that in the show notes as well. Thanks for your time, Kimberly. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a fantastic week.
You too. Take good care.
You too. Bye-bye. Such a great show with Kimberly Mansfield, Demuna's Law. And I can't imagine, when I think back about all the second chances I've had in this life, and it's not a small thing to get a second chance, and it can truly be life-changing. And I took so much from this episode. I hope you took so much from this episode as well. All of Kimberly's links and all of the important information will be in the show notes. Please be sure to check that out, including my partnership with Coffee Bros and Sunday Scaries. And that will do it for another episode of the Kindness Matters podcast. We will, of course, be back next week with another show. But until then, be that person who roots for others, who tells a stranger that they look amazing, and encourages others to believe in themselves and their dreams. And for this show, I'm going to throw in another one. Be that person who gives someone a second chance. You have been listening to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. Have a fantastic week.